Hey there, this is Leo from the Black Sky Ranch. This will be my 7th video. Hopefully they're getting a little better as I get more comfortable talking on camera. Today I want to talk about multi-tools. Those are those pocket combination tools we carry in a pouch on our belt or in our pocket. Now you're probably thinking I'm going to be talking about these Leatherman products, and well, we'll see. I have a few Leathermans. I've used them for years since they first came out. I think back in the late 70s or early 80s. I've never really loved them. They have a lot of uses. They're not bad tools, but they're a compromise. This particular one, the Leatherman Wave, is the one I've used the most. The Wave, they've rounded it all off, made it smooth so it's not so uncomfortable. They've moved a lot of the tools to the outside so that you don't have to even open the tool to use them. They've done the one-handed opening and they lock, both the regular knife and the serrated edge. The file and the saw are also on the outside. Everything locks. And all the smaller tools are on the inside. And this one even has a pair of scissors, which I find pretty handy. And for their size, they're pretty good scissors. You can actually do cut some fairly heavy stuff with those pliers. So there's nothing wrong with Leathermans or this type of pocket tool. I like them, I use them, but I don't use them as much as I used to. I tend to use something like this for formal occasions, when I'm wearing a Class A uniform or going to a wedding or going out to a restaurant or traveling, when you want the minimum tool and something that you can wear on a pouch on your belt. It's hardly noticeable. It's no more noticeable than a cell phone or all the other gadgets people carry. Pretty well socially acceptable almost anywhere now. But there's problems with these. One of the things I don't like is the way the pliers work. I haven't found one yet that doesn't pinch my hand when I'm using it, especially for any kind of heavy work. Really trying to put some force on it or really squeeze something. I always end up catching a piece of my hand in that pinch point right there. End up either bleeding all over my work or just raising a blood blister. The other thing, I don't particularly care for these, and I know there are different models and different makes that have different plier jaws, but this is limited to how big of a nut or a bolt you can turn with it. When you start getting to heavier bolts like this, it just doesn't really work. You can get a hold of it if you really have to, but you're kind of extended on your handles, and in this case this would probably damage the cutters on the inside of the jaws. So they're a combination plier. They give you a limited capability to turn nuts and bolts, and they give you the needle nose for some of the finer work. Another thing I don't like about them is sometimes you get wire or something jammed in the cutters. And these cutters are pretty good, and they're better than they used to be, and they're hardened, but they're bypass cutters, which means the two jaws pass each other, make a shearing motion rather than nippers that cut like this. And so you can get wire, especially narrow wire. You can kind of get it so that it bypasses and doesn't cut. I don't think I'll be able to simulate it here, but you'll actually jam those jaws on the wire. It wouldn't do it. And when it comes time to try to pull them apart, you end up pulling the handles apart like that, and you can't, and they're stuck together. There's no way to force open the jaws. So they're not the best pliers. So as you can see, it's become socially acceptable for people to carry pliers around with them. They're folding pliers, but they're still pliers. So my solution to the problem was to just carry pliers and a Swiss Army knife. Now when I go to work, I carry these. I took the regular brown leather sheath that you get at the hardware store and dyed it black and polished it. I got some pliers that I reserve for work. They're shiny and they have red handles. They're not worn. I don't beat on them. I use them when I work on the ambulance or the fire department. And they don't look out of place on my equipment belt with all my other stuff. I get some comments on them. People ask me if I'm going fishing or whatever, but they don't look too strange. I think you can get away with carrying something like that. So that's kind of my minimum, would be that and a Swiss Army knife. Now, the reason we carry the MultiTool is because we want pliers, we want a knife, we want a Phillips screwdriver, we want a flathead screwdriver, and for more rural stuff I like to have a saw as well. Now the Leatherman has all of that, but I get pretty much the same in this, minus the saw. I get the knife blade, and this one has 2 knife blades. Get the Phillips screwdriver, get the flathead screwdriver, a big one and a small one on the end of the bottle opener. So with this tool, with these 2 tools, I can do just about everything I can do with this one. Only better, because these pliers are made as pliers. There's no pinch points on them. They'll actually cut heavier wire more easily than the Leatherman. You can crank on them. There's no real weak spots on this. You can use them for a hammer if you want to. You can use them as a pry bar to pry things up. So they just work better as pliers than the Leatherman tool. When I'm around the homestead and I combine a pair of pliers with this Swiss Army knife, I get all that plus a saw. So this combination here gives me everything that the Leatherman gives me, only I think better. Kind of one of the things I like about the Leatherman, though, is that it has a better, more pointier blade than the Swiss Army knives do, and sometimes it's nice to have a fine point like that. But in reality, I always have another knife on me. The small blade on this isn't too bad when it comes to fine work, but when I carry this combination, I always make sure that my primary knife that I carry has a pretty fine point on it, because I like to have the capability to have a little sharp little point on there, digging splinters out of my hand or whatever. So that's my solution. As you can see, this one will turn bolts a lot bigger. Bolts, being a slip joint, you can make it wider and you can get a really good grip on a bolt this size. You can easily cut a decent size, decent thickness of wire with these. Pretty much whatever wire will fit in those jaws, it'll cut without pinching my hand. The Leatherman will probably cut that as well, but I'm almost guaranteed to pinch my hand. Even though these are kind of crude jaws, they will cut smaller wire just as well as a Leatherman does. Zip ties, the jaws are a little short for that, but you can cut zip ties with that as well. So they're pretty handy. This particular pair I just recently bought. I was at the auto parts store and I saw these and I had to have them. One of the great advantages of the Leatherman tools is the pliers they're a compromise, but they try to get as many features into one plier head as they can. So you've got needle nose as well as the bolt grippers. Most needle nose pliers are just have flat and then a wire cutter. So these are useful for that way, but as I showed, they won't take as big a nut. The standard slip joint pliers, which I've generally been carrying for all these years, are a fatter jaw. So I found this one, and it's kind of halfway in between. It's not as narrow this way as a needle nose, but again, it's a compromise. As you can see, it just kind of fits right in there. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to switch over to these, and again, I got a nice blue handle one, and that'll go well with my medical gear. I also bought a larger pair when I'm working around the homestead. Sometimes it's nice to have even a bigger pair. You get more leverage on it. The heads are pretty much the same size. You just get more power out of the larger one. So that's my new favorite. And when it's the supersized version, I guess, would be the larger pliers and the larger Swiss Army knife. Now these are great. They don't quite fit in a pocket. They work better sometimes with a belt pouch, unless you've got big pockets. But as you can see, the standard size of the Leatherman, I've got a saw that is 3 inches long, and if you count just the teeth, it's really 2.5 inches long. Now for a tool that is basically the same length, I've got a saw that is 3.5 inches long, just counting the teeth, just under 3.5 inches long. So I get quite a bit bigger of a saw and basically the same size tool. So that's an advantage. So my mega size would be the larger pliers and the larger Swiss Army knife. But generally it's going to be these pliers and this knife. Now, what's the weight penalty? Well, I'll go again with the Leatherman Wave. I've got a little scale here. It's not terribly accurate, just a cooking scale, but it's showing about 8.5 ounces for that. Now these pliers are 7 ounces, and the Swiss Army knife, even with the lanyard and the little flashlight, is 3 ounces. So it's 10 versus 8.5. So 1.5 ounces heavier. I get what I consider a better set of tools with this combination than with that. This one goes either in a belt sheath or a pocket, and this just goes in a pocket, pretty much unnoticeable. Now I'm going to change the camera and show you how I carry these when I'm around the homestead. I don't know if it's just coincidence or not, but this pocket on a regular set of Carhartt bib overalls, that sheath fits in there, and the seam on it actually grabs hold so it does not come out easily. And the pliers fit in there, and they're pretty snug. I mean, they can fall out if you stand on your head, but they're pretty snug. If you try using just the pliers without the pouch, they fall right out of there. As soon as I sit down, they fall out onto the floor. So I don't know if Carhartt did that on purpose, but that's the way I carry those. So as far as what pliers you carry, as I said, I settled on these. I'm going to give them a try anyway. But you really have to look at your circumstances, what kind of work you end up doing, what you end up needing. A lot of people would prefer they work more with electrical stuff, wires. They may prefer something like this. This particular pair is a little bit oversized for a belt sheath, but it'd work. But this type here has really good cutters for fine wire, and you can work with some nuts and bolts with it. Some people really like vice grips. This is a really tiny pair. You could actually probably fit these in your pocket. But a lot of people like these. It really just depends on the kind of work you do. I don't know if too many people even realize that you can cut wire with these. They have a wire cutter on them, and they'll cut fine wire. A set this size probably won't work too well on heavier wire, but the larger size ones sure will. And these come in handy because you can just use them as a clamp sometimes. You just need to hold two things together that you're working on, and you use them as a clamp. So that's another possibility. Some people may just really like needle nose pliers, but again, if you get a set of standalone needle nose pliers as opposed to a Leatherman tool, I think you'd be better off. Another thing I should mention, I guess, with my standard work set, I always have some trauma shears with me, and so the fact that there's no scissors on these tools doesn't affect me as much. I get these for free, so I don't mind abusing them. They'll cut a lot. I think most people are aware of these. Even this is a smaller pair, kind of an undersized pair, but they'll cut small wire easily. So, and these weigh an ounce. Also around the homestead, I tend to carry a screwdriver. Not so much to drive screws, although you can use it for that, but for opening paint cans, chipping ice, scraping mud off of the cleats of my boots, whatever, where I don't want to abuse the screwdriver blades that I have on the knife. So I think that's all for today. I hope that wasn't too disjointed. We'll see you next time.